of my life, I've been fascinated by miracles. Like, I mean the real, true blue miracles. These things that can happen and you just don't ever see it coming. Or maybe you pray and pray and pray for it. Or maybe somebody just walks up and it says, boom, and somebody's healed. Or a leg gets straightened out that had always been shriveled up. Or somebody who could never talk or could never hear could suddenly speak lots of words. It can hear everything going around. I'm fascinated by this. I have these two-volume set by Craig S. Keener called Miracles, and it documents miracles in the New Testament and then miracles that have been taking place around the world, like documented things. I've been reading through it. I've kind of slacked off on it lately because I've got some other things coming up, but it's fascinating stuff to me. I think it's partly because, A, miracles are fascinating, but B, I grew up in a church that believed that miracles could happen and that they would happen. Like if you prayed and if you had faith, they also would happen. Now, I know that that's increasingly falling out of favor more in the Western world. We are more and more skeptical of the idea of miracles. And I mean, we don't blame people for that because we've seen so many charlatans come along and say, hey, this is a miracle. And really, like, there's somebody in the back doing a ventriloquist dummy or something like that. Or they're going, hey, this person needs this, this, and this. And then they pray for it and somehow they get it. Like, I get this skepticism there. But let me say this to you. If you are a follower of Jesus, you already believe in at least two miracles. You have to. You have to. Number one, that God could become a human. That's the first miracle, that could happen. Because when we say this miracle is going to happen, like we're saying God stepped out of eternity and into time and space. I mean, that blows my mind that God would ever do that. Anytime we're talking about a miracle that God is performing through us or for us, God is stepping out of eternity and into time and space. The God who is bigger and greater than anything we could ever imagine is stepping out of time and space, or stepping out of eternity and into time and space for us. That's a miracle. And we believe that God did exactly that in Jesus. We also believe, if you're a follower of Jesus like me, you also believe that Jesus rose from the dead. That's a miracle. So we believe, if you're a follower of Jesus, in miracles, right? We believe in them. But what you and I both know is that sometimes when you pray and you pray and you pray for miracles, it seems like the supply for the miracles is less than the demand for miracles. That little church I grew up in, I knew a lot of people who believed in these miracles and would pray for them and expect things to happen. And as a result, I knew other people in like-minded churches who would also pray for miracles and expect these miracles to happen. I mean, it was nothing to see one of them walking through the mall or walking down the street and see somebody in a leg cast or a knee brace or something and walk up and go, just start praying for them, praying for them to be healed and come out of that cast. Meanwhile, the person's looking at them going, what are you doing? What's going on? And they're like, shh, 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 I'm trying to heal you. This is for you. No worries. And it would sometimes get weird for people, but they believed it so strongly that they thought, if I have enough faith, this will happen. The trouble was, they would do this all the time, and they rarely, if ever, saw any results. And when you pray for miracles and you expect miracles to happen, what happens when they don't? What happens when these miracles don't happen? Because that's the trouble with miracles. By definition, they're irregular. You don't know when they're going to happen. You don't know if they're going to happen. They just sometimes do. And you and I, we've known a lot of people who are praying for miracles at different times, and when that miracle didn't happen, they said, no thank you to God, didn't they? Maybe you were this person at one time. Maybe you're still this person. Your dad got sick, and you said, I prayed to God over and over and over again, and nothing. God didn't fix it. I'm done. I prayed for my kids. They're still running wild and free. They're still out there doing all this stuff. I prayed and I prayed and I prayed. I prayed for God to take that thing away from me, that thing that keeps holding me back, and nothing. I see all the evil in the world, all the stuff, all the war, all the hatred, all the bigotry, all of it. I see all of it, and it just affects me so much. And I pray, God, why don't you step in? Why don't you do something about this? miracle never comes. And so we see people who turn their backs on God because the miracle never comes. We've got big areas when it comes to these miracles, don't we? And when God doesn't intervene, sometimes we don't know what to do with that. Sometimes we come up against moments in our lives where we just don't know what to do. That's why we're walking through this series. We kicked it off last week. What to do when you don't know what to do. Because we all come up against these moments. What do I do now? Last week we said we want to seek wisdom and not just quick fixes in our life. We want to go ask people who really know what they're talking about. Not people who are just giving advice, but people who are genuinely wise. We want to continue in that vein today by looking at the Apostle Paul. He's an early leader in the faith, not too long after Jesus died and was resurrected. Paul was this guy who had this tremendous moment where he came to faith. Like God appeared to him. Jesus appeared to him and said, hey, quit doing this. Come follow me instead. And Paul said, all right, I'll do that. Now, anybody who you thought was dead and then suddenly is resurrected from the dead and appears to you, you're going to listen to that person, I would imagine. So that's exactly what Paul does. And Paul begins serving in a local church. The next thing you know, Paul is going all over the known area, all over the Mediterranean area, and he's preaching to people. He's bringing people to faith. He's going into these places where nobody's ever heard of Jesus, and he's talking about Jesus. It's really miraculous that he would go, because he ends up getting beaten all the time. A few times they throw rocks at him until he stops moving. They called it stoning. They thought he was dead. He was left for dead multiple times. He had to be snuck out of areas. And this is the guy who had to learn to pray to God and ask God for miracles, but he also had to learn how to live life when God didn't intervene, isn't he? I'm sure as he's getting stoned, he wasn't just saying, okay, I can handle all this. I'm sure he was praying, God, can you make this stop? When he's thrown in jail, God, can you get me out of here? Can we do something here? What are you going to do? I'm doing all this for you, God. He had to learn how to live life when God didn't intervene. And while he's doing that, over the course of 25, 30 years of ministry, he writes a lot of letters to other people, instructing them on how they should be doing this. He writes letters to churches all over the empire about how they should be doing this. And one of the letters he writes is to a church in Rome. Now, the church in Rome, if you're a history person at all, I want to tell you this. You need to look up the history of the church in Rome, because it's really incredible. You know, we think about guys like Paul or some of the other disciples or other apostles. They would show up in these places and they would preach and they would teach and win people to faith. That did not happen in Rome. In fact, what they believe happened at least, is that there were Jewish people from Rome in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost, when Peter got up and said, hey, all of y'all need to believe that Jesus is the Messiah. Here's the proof. And 5,000 people came to faith that day, just right after that sermon. They believe that as the church began to grow in Jerusalem, there were people from Rome who were there during this festival time. They'd come for Passover, and then they stayed for the festival weeks, which we know later it kind of as Pentecost. And they took that faith back home with them to Rome. Or, also plausible, there were a lot of people who were in Jerusalem, living in Jerusalem, and ended up immigrating to Rome. These Jewish, now Jesus followers. Now remember, early on, this thing called the Way, what we later come to call Christianity or being followers of Jesus, it was just a sect within Judaism. They believed that they had found the Messiah that all Jews were looking for. And so they got to stay in the synagogues. So when these Jewish Jesus followers showed back up in Rome, there starts being some problem. It starts being a little bit of problem, but there also starts being a little bit of success. They have problems with people who don't buy what they're saying, but they have success with people who do buy what they're saying about Jesus. And it wasn't just other Jews they had success with. They also had success with people known as God-fearers. Now, these were people who were followers of Judaism, but they weren't ethnically Jewish. They had come to fear the God of the Jews, so they called them God-fearers. fearers. So they started winning over, these Jewish Christians started winning over non-Jewish God-fearers, what we might call Gentile believers now. So you start bringing these people into the fold too. Suddenly, there are these smaller house churches that start springing up because they believe all this stuff. That now their Jewish counterparts over here didn't believe, but they believed these things. They held these things in common. Well, as unfortunately has happened throughout history over and over again, at one point, the emperor of Rome expelled all Jews from the city of Rome. They had to get out. They couldn't stay in their homes. They couldn't have their businesses there any longer. This has happened throughout history, by the way. If you go and look, anytime a king or a mayor or a governor or a prince or somebody would get in trouble, a lot of times they would say, this is one group's fault, and they would blame the Jews. And the Jews would all be expelled for a number of years. This happened in Rome. When this happened, the people who had been leading these small house churches were all Jewish Christians by and large. So when they were expelled from Rome, these Gentile, non-Jewish believers, these followers of Jesus, had to figure things out on their own. They had to take everything that they had learned from their Jewish Christian brothers and sisters, and they had to figure it out now. And they developed their own hierarchical structures. They developed theology that hadn't maybe been there before. And so when Jews were allowed to come back into Rome, the Jewish Christians come to their Gentile brothers and sisters and said, hey, we're back, let's do this again, let's get it back to normal. And all the Gentile Christians said, well, I think we got it handled. I think we got it figured out. Why don't y'all just kind of settle back in and go slow? They started having some problems, started knocking heads a little bit. There were differences in belief. There were differences in theology. Some of these Jewish Christians believed that these Gentile Christians needed to get circumcised, just like every other Jewish person did, right? Like all of those things start happening. Now, while that's going on the other side of the Mediterranean Sea, Paul was fighting the same battle on behalf of his Gentile converts. Right? The church in Jerusalem, where everything had kind of started and kicked off, they were very serious about everybody becoming a circumcised, law-abiding Jew. Whereas Paul and his compatriots out of Antioch were saying, well, we want them to be righteous and we want them to live godly lives, but we're free, right? We're free. We don't need them to come get circumcised now. They don't have to do that sort of thing. Well, Paul would go and preach this and win Gentile converts, and then a group would come along behind him and say, well, Paul was kind of right, but you actually do need to be a full-on Jewish person before you can ever be a Christian. So Paul sees and hears what's going on in Rome, and he takes it as an opportunity after 25, 30 years of ministry to write them a letter addressing the situation, to write them a letter to really help them figure out how they're supposed to coexist as people of faith from different ethnic backgrounds. How they're supposed to do this while they're being persecuted as a group by the emperor, by the religious establishment within Rome, and by the elite in Rome. Well, when he writes all this, he spends a lot of time telling both sides, you need to be united in love. In fact, look at this. He says this, love must be sincere. Now, if you were reading that in the Greek in Romans 12, it just says sincere love or genuine love. It's a heading for everything that's going to be coming after it. So we're going to see what sincere love is, right? So he goes on, he says, hate what is evil, cling to what is good. So if it's sincere love, you're going to hate what is evil, you're going to cling to what is good. If it's sincere love with that spouse, you're going to hate what is evil, you're going to cling to what is good. You are going to do everything you can to be good to that person. You're going to run away from all the evil stuff that you possibly can. You are going to cling to what is good, right? This is true about feelings. This is true about feelings. When we feel something, it leads us to an action. If I hate something, right, it moves me to an action of some kind. If I hate something, I'm going to maybe stay away from it. I'm going to steer clear. I'm going to tell others how much I hate that thing, whatever. I hate Brussels sprouts. They're not allowed in my house. Now, If I cling to what is good, though, if I cling to what is actually a good thing, I'm going to tell other people about that too. And I'm going to be doing good things. I'm going to celebrate that good thing as much as I possibly can. Well, Paul says, I want you to hate what is evil, cling to what is good. Now, here is what that looks like. He says, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourself. So be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. That's what it looks like to hate what is evil and to cling to what is good. Now remember who he's talking to. He's talking to people that were probably jockeying for position. He's talking to people who are probably trying to prove their point all the time, who maybe weren't listening to the other side all the time while they were waiting for their turn to speak. We wouldn't know anything about that in 21st century America, would we? Paul says, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. He goes on, never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor. Now, never be lacking in zeal. Keep your spiritual fervor. Now, this is the way that somebody might try to get you ramped up to go and do something. And unfortunately, there have been people who've only quoted this first half of the verse in an attempt to get people riled up to go do something they probably shouldn't have in the name of Jesus. But look what Paul follows it up with. Keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Serving the Lord. That's what it's all about. If you're going to have spiritual fervor, it's not so that everybody can agree with you. It's not so that everybody can be on your side. It's so that you can actually, truly serve the Lord. That's the whole point. He says, be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. And then he follows up the serving of the Lord with this. He says, share with the Lord's people who are in need, practice hospitality. So if you're serving the Lord, right, you're going to set the example. You're going to be patient in affliction. You're going to be patient in affliction. You're going to be joyful in hope. You're going to be faithful in your prayer. You're also going to be sharing with the Lord's people who are in need. You're going to practice hospitality. You're going to be there for other people. That's what it looks like. Now, if that's all we talked about today, that's exactly what you would expect to hear in church, I think, right? That's all the good stuff, the warm fuzzies that make you go, yeah, that's what we really need to be doing. And you'd be right. That'd be enough for most of us. But Paul doesn't stop there because Paul believes the ethic of Jesus pushes us further into a place that often makes us very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. Especially when we don't know what to do. When we have found ourselves locked into a situation where we just literally don't know how to handle things. That's exactly where this church in Rome had found themselves. They were fighting amongst each other in an unprecedented way. They didn't know what to do in this brand new movement. And on the outside of this movement, you had people coming against them who were actively persecuting them, actively trying to hurt them and stomp out this movement. And it's to those people Paul gives the uncomfortable ethic of Jesus in a time when they didn't know what to do. Here's what he said. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. So in case you wanted to explain away this first part, he repeats it on purpose. Bless those who persecute you. Bless, do not curse. Look, I know there's people who are out there saying all kind of things about you. I know there's people who are trying to hurt you actively. I know there's people who are doing this and doing that. You can come up with all kinds of reasons why they are bad and you are good and they are wrong, and I'm sure they are wrong, but here's what I need you to understand. You should be trying to bless them instead of curse them. And man, that's a word for us. That's a word for us today. One of the sad things I see happening amongst 21st century Christians in America is we're trying to call people out all the time. We're adopting so much of our culture and the angst of our culture that people start doing this thing where they think they're embodying the prophetic of the Old Testament. And what I mean by that is prophets in the Old Testament would walk in on behalf of God and say, you're doing this wrong, you need to get it fixed, or God's going to get you. And I see so many well-meaning Christians in the public sphere who are essentially, in my opinion, building a brand around trying to be a prophet in 21st century America. And they're walking up and they're trying to call out other well-meaning Christians who believe differently than they do. And they're screaming at them, and they're yelling at them, and they're telling them how terrible they are, and how they're this, and how they are an abomination, and how they're this, and how they are all of these things. And to us, Paul says, bless those who persecute you. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Man. If we could get that, because that's the ethic of Jesus that makes us uncomfortable. What comes natural when other people are persecuting you is to fight. What comes natural when other people are persecuting you is to talk about how terrible they are, to get other people on your side. It's this human thing we do called triangulation. We try to bring other people in. Instead, bless them. And he goes on, he says, rejoice with those who rejoice. Give high fives to the people that good things are happening to. Also, mourn with those who mourn. Be there for them. You don't have to have all the answers. Just mourn with them. Be sad with them. Be happy when they're happy. Be sad when they're sad. Be with them. And in that way, he goes on, you can live in harmony with one another. Live in harmony. That's it. Don't be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Y'all, that is such a low bar. That's such a low bar, isn't it? Don't be conceited. Share your life with other people. Be there for them. Love one another. And yet we still struggle. We come up with all these reasons why we don't have to do this. We come up with all these reasons we don't have to do any of this stuff. That doesn't mean the call to it is any less. See, these people were facing real persecution, real anger, real hatred. They were having real issues. Many of them had been kind of kicked out of their communities. And it's to them Paul continues and says this, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Instead, be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. Don't repay evil for evil. Now, you might remember from history, there's this thing called the lex talionis, this law from the Old Testament that we find, right? An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, right? You paid back one evil with appropriate retribution. He says, don't repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. That's the difference. That's the juxtaposition he has. On this hand, you're going to repay evil for evil. On this hand, well, do what's right in front of everybody. That's your response, to do what is right. When other people have done evil to you, when you don't really know how to handle it other than to be rude and nasty and mean and hateful, your response is to do what is right in the eyes of everyone, to do what is honorable in the eyes of everyone, to do what is good and godly in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, he says, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Wait a minute. I thought I had rights where I could yell at people and tell them how dumb they were. I thought I could just do all of that and that I would be on God's team if I was mad at everyone and I showed all of my zeal with all of that. And I did my level best to yell at people into the kingdom. No, live at peace, he says. It's a better tactic anyways. Nobody ever became a Christian because everybody was yelling them into it. You maybe have heard of the old fire and brimstone, turn and burn. Maybe that worked one day. I don't think it worked all that well. I think most people become real, authentic followers of Jesus because of the love that they experience through God's people. They see the change. They see the difference in life as a result of following Jesus and following Jesus well. So really and truly, doing this helps bring people into the kingdom. And Paul understands that. Martin Luther King Jr. once said this at Oberlin College, and he said, "That old law about an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind. The time is always right to do the right thing." Always. Always. Always time to do the right thing. It's always right to do the right thing. That's why Paul follows up part of his stuff by saying this: do not overcome by evil. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. It's always time to do what's right, whether it's good, bad, ugly around you. It's always the right time to do the good thing, the godly thing, the right thing. And so often the things that kind of stop us or keep us feeling like we don't know what to do, 99% of the time it seems like it's something that we would classify as evil. Whether it's a diagnosis, death, violence, injustice, it always seems like those things that keep us in a place where we don't know what we're doing or how to handle a situation is something that we might classify as bad or evil, at least not good. And Paul says, do what's right. Overcome evil with good. My daughters love these movies, the Frozen, right? The Disney and Frozen. They love them. The first one's like 10 years old. I remember being a youth pastor, and we're riding across country on this bus to go to something in Boston, from Memphis to Boston. Really long trip, but they were a lot of fun. And they would randomly bust out in a song. And so one day we're on this bus, and they randomly bust out into this song from the first Frozen movie, like, let it go, let it go. Oh, I thought you were going to pick it up there. Sorry. I thought you were going to. Well, they would do this, and they start singing the whole thing, and the whole bus is just singing the whole. I'm like, how do you guys know this whole song? This is crazy. But let me give you a hot take. I think the soundtrack from Frozen 2, which came out a few years ago, is much better. Right? So all the parents in the room, I know you agree with me. Yeah, it's better. And there's this one song in this. I'll spoiler alert, so I'm not going to do any of that. There's this one spot. There's two, if you're not familiar with Frozen, like this is Queen Elsa, this is Princess Anna. You're welcome. And something happens to Queen Elsa, and Princess Anna is very, very sad about it, and she doesn't know what to do in that moment. And it's a musical, so there's a song attached to it. And in this part of the song, she says, when this happens, now that this has happened and I don't know what to do, you've always kind of been there doing all, I don't know what to do because I can't find you right now. I don't know where you're at. I'll do what I know I should, which is to do the next right thing. And friends, when you don't know what to do that. Do the next right thing that you can, whatever it is you can think of. And you may be facing a gigantic problem. You may be facing something huge, something I can't even grasp. And don't hear me making light of that. But what I'm saying to you is, there's an old proverb, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Step by step. You just keep doing it. Sometimes you got to wake up in life and keep putting your foot in front of the next one. Keep putting your foot going in front of the next one. And when you do that, just keep doing the next right thing. You know, we pray and we pray and we pray for these miracles, but what if when we're waiting on God to resolve things for us, what if we just decided that while we're waiting, we're going to do the next right and godly and good thing? What if every time we took the next step, whatever it is, no matter how big or how small, we just decided, I'm going to do the next right thing that I can? And what if that isn't a miracle in and of itself? We participate in the miracles of this life by staying faithful before the miracle ever happens. You want a miracle in your life? Just keep being faithful. I'm not saying God's going to suddenly swoop in and fix everything for you. But you might look around and be astonished at what God was doing all along and what God was doing to the lives of others around you. Ultimately, one of the things we know is that God is always doing the next right thing for us. Paul even writes as much. We know that God works all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose, Paul writes. So God is still working on our behalf and guiding us. The best thing that we can do when we don't know exactly what to do is just keep doing the next right thing. I'm reminded of a GPS. I don't know if you've ever gotten lost and all you had was your GPS out somewhere else that you're not familiar with. And when you're out in that place you don't want to be, and you got a place that you're trying to get to, that GPS will give you turn-by-turn instructions to get there, won't it? And whenever you do the next right thing, you're essentially just taking the next correct turn to get to where you need to be. So when you don't know what to do, just do the next right thing. When everything is so complicated, when everything is so confusing, just put one foot in front of the other and keep doing the next right thing. In a moment, our band's going to come out and they're going to lead us in another song. I want you to think about, what does it mean to do the next right thing in your life? What are you going through? I don't know. What are you going through? What kind of decisions do you have to make to do the next right thing? It may be huge, but it may be small. It may just mean you got to get out of bed in the morning and make breakfast for your kids. What's the next right thing you can do? Let me pray for you. Lord, thank you for the example that you give us. Thank you for your word that draws us to you, that draws us and commands us really to do the next right thing. Help us to see what it is you're doing in the world. Help us to see what you're doing in our life. But even when we don't see it, give us the strength and give us the courage to do the next right thing. Give us the clarity of thought to see what it might be to do the next right thing, so that we might get out of that time of uncertainty. Pray for everybody listening to me, that you would give us all the strength.